Welcome to Wild and Weird Women of the Bible. This is a contemporary interpretation of the famous and the infamous. Questionable characters such as Eve, as well as those revered or despised for generations. We get to meet these characters as if they lived next door. And if there's hope for them, then there's hope for us all. We will hear each woman's story, the pathos, the joys, the foibles, and sometimes even the faith that connects all of them to one another and to us. Miss Linda Gray Kelley has written, produced, and directed, and will perform this excerpt from her award-winning plays entitled Women of the Bible, The Good Girls and the Bad Girls, and Women of the Gospel. She has brought along 11 of her favorite wild and weird women of the Bible. These plays have been critically acclaimed and enjoyed internationally in her full-length touring stage production. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy some of the wild and weird women of the Bible. And we start, as all things do, with Eve. Whenever we feel like blaming someone for our human predicament, it's easy to pick on Eve. After all, she blew it out there for all of us, back in the Garden of Eden. Not much was really asked of her, only to follow some certain dietary restrictions. But that was obviously too much for her to handle. But perhaps we should hear her side of the story.
I am called Eve, which means mother of all who live. But I'm not exactly sure how I got here in the first place. One day I wake up and there's this guy staring down at me and this incredible voice saying, "It is not right for man to be alone." And then the voice tells the guy that while he was sleeping, he took one of his ribs and fashioned me as his companion. Well, the guy's name was Adam, and he seemed really glad to see me, and he gave me a tour of the place. And it looked real good. There was sky and grass and trees, millions of trees. Beautiful sun by day and stars and moon by night. There were waterfalls and flowers. Oh, the flowers were my personal favorite. Every color and shape you could imagine, and the fragrance. Unbelievable. And the animals, they were so tame, you could pet them and they would sleep right beside us. And the food, well, it was like an all-you-could-eat buffet, except for this one tree, which Adam pointed out to me. He said, "God has made this whole garden place for us, but this one tree here is off limits. We must never even touch it. And if we eat it, we shall die." Okay, fine, I said, because there were plenty of other trees and treats to be had. So one day, as we were strolling along, we passed God's special trees. A serpent spoke to us. "Did God really say you're not supposed to eat any of the trees, fruit in the garden?" So I set him straight. I knew the drill. "No, my serpent, we may eat the fruit of any of the trees in the garden. It's just this one particular tree that's hands off. If we eat it, we shall die." The serpent laughed. He certainly was the strangest creature I had ever met in the garden. "No, you will not die. God knows that if you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will become like gods, knowing good from evil. If God is so good as you say, why isn't he sharing this particular tree with you? What's up with that?" Well, he did make a small point. So I did a double take on the tree. It does have excellent fruit for eating. Yum. And it is a lovely tree, beautiful to behold. And if it was designed to make one wise, well, who could argue with that? We could taste the wisdom that belongs only to God. What's that worth to you? So I grabbed one, and I ate it. And the serpent hissed out a laugh. But nothing happened. Then I gave it to Adam, who would have never dared to go first. But since I am his loyal garden companion, and since I didn't keel over or anything, he took a big old bite. Which only goes to prove that man is the weaker sex, because he didn't even try to stop me. Next thing I noticed wasn't thunder and lightning, as you might expect. No, I noticed we didn't have a stitch of clothing on. And wouldn't that be a good idea? So, I made these fashionable loincloths out of fig leaves. Because, you see, we were afraid. We were ashamed. We knew we blew it. Oh, we had gotten the knowledge of evil, all right, and we were living proof of it. Then God showed up and told us to come out of the bushes where we were hiding. We told him we were afraid because we were naked. And God said, "Who told you that you're naked? Have you two been eating from my tree?" And Adam said, "It's all her fault. She made me do it." "Why did you do that?" they both asked me. So I told the truth. Well, the serpent tempted me, and so I ate. And God put his curse on the serpent right where it belonged. Unfortunately, it didn't stop there. He also put a curse on me and all women. You will give birth to your children in pain, intense pain. Then he put a curse on Adam and all men to follow. Cursed be the soil because of you. Painfully you shall get your food from it as long as you both shall live. There will be thistles and brambles and rocks. By the sweat of your brow you shall work for your food until you return to the earth. For you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. And that was that. Our life of comfort and convenience was officially over. Now we had to farm the land for the food we once took for granted. And sweat we did. I went on to have 3 sons. And you know what God said about childbirth? Well, he wasn't kidding. But then some of you know exactly what I mean.
So you say to yourself, what would I have done? How much blame should we lay on Adam? Was it the disobedience or the deceit that caused the first married couple to be expelled from the garden? Who knows, but we have been fragile humans ever since. Next, we all know the story of Noah's Ark. It's one of the first Bible stories we teach our children. They never tire of the animals, the boat, and the adventure at sea. We don't always stress the fact that thousands of people died. Try to imagine their terror and imagine the gratitude of those aboard the ark. Scripture scholars debate about the Great Flood and the Garden of Eden and wonder if the author of Genesis meant these stories as parables. But one thing is clear, it must have been quite a ride. If you were the mom, how would you have handled it? Let's hear from Noah's wife. Her name from Hebrew scripture is Naamah, and get her take on all of this.
My husband Noah and I had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And they each managed to marry good girls. Not that they couldn't use some improvement, but good girls just the same. And around here that's saying something, because the people of this town are wicked. And one day my hubby comes home with the news that the world is going to be destroyed by God because of the wickedness of the people, and only our family would be saved. You know, none of us likes these people who have these conversations with God and then show up in our face with an agenda. But my Noah did more than that. He started building this huge structure. It was so big, it took up an acre or more of land. Every weekend, he was out there hammering. Couldn't get him interested in any home improvement projects, oh no, it was always the boat, the boat, the boat. Oh, excuse me, I forgot. It's an ark. It seems that God was going to wipe out the human race with a worldwide flood. Neighbors would drop by, kibbutz, have a few laughs. Hey, Noah, since when do you folks have waterfront property? How do you plan to float this monstrosity? But my Noah was undaunted. Sometimes on the weekend, the boys would help him out. It became a permanent eyesore in our yard. I was mortified. Then finally, it was done. And I thought we were going to get our lives back, but oh no. Now he goes on safari and brings back all sorts of animals and loads them all up into the boat. I mean the ark. Then he has to schlep food for all these animals, and guess what I was in charge of? Travel food for all of us, and believe me, this was no picnic. So one day the sun was shining and I was hanging out the wash as usual, and Noah told us all to get aboard the boat. I mean the ark. What makes a boat an ark anyway? And so we did. It was God's order after all. And out of nowhere came this huge tropical storm. Unusual weather we were having for that time of year. And heavy rains fell for 40 days and 40 nights. I know. I counted. And soon the ark lifted off dry land and was afloat. Sadly, we saw everyone and everything perish. Oh, the humanity. We lost the farm, of course, but we were so glad to be afloat and safe and alive that we didn't care. I made the meals, and feeding a party of 8 wasn't too bad. But feeding those animals was a full-time job. And the cleanup? Oi, I'm telling you. Then finally the rain stopped and the sun came out. And Noah sent out birds to see if there was any dry land to be found. And soon we landed atop the mountains of Ararat. And God told Noah that we could bring the animals out onto dry land. Only it wasn't exactly dry. The mud, ugh, I'm telling you. But it felt like heaven to our feet, eyes, and hearts to be back on solid ground again. And what a view! I'm telling you, I could live here. So we built an altar to offer sacrifice to God for saving us from the flood. We made it, ooh, we made it. And high in the sky was the most beautiful sight. Colors of light across the sky. It was stunning. And it was a sign of God's promise never to destroy the world by flood again. Then he told us to breed, multiply, and repopulate the earth. And so we did. I am so proud of my Noah for listening and obeying God's voice. I know I gave him a hard time, always complaining about all that construction and all those animals and that endless voyage for almost a year. But you know what? It was worth it. We made it, ooh, we made it!
Well, they seemed to live happily ever after. Joyful at being spared by the flood, we wonder if Noah's wife ever gave up her litany of complaints and her illusion of control. Sometimes when we are denied something, we always want to make darn sure that no one else gets to have it either. Sour grapes, I suppose. Actually, Potiphar's wife was a desperate housewife. Desperate for some, attention from her husband, or perhaps from her handsome slave, Joseph. Good thing Joe was a good guy. He did the righteous thing by turning down her seduction attempts, but ended up getting punished for it anyway. Oh, poor Joe. He always managed to get the short end of the stick.
That's what happens. You take them in, from slavery no less, and give them everything. At least I tried to give him everything. And I do mean everything. Why not? Joe was young and sexy and lived under my own roof. I ain't dead yet. You see, my husband Potiphar bought him in as a slave, and well, Joe did such a good job around the house that Potty put him in charge of the whole household. And well, you see, Potty was gone a lot, managing things for Pharaoh. And Joe was handsome and strong and quite the gentleman. So I taunted him and tried to seduce him. But he would have nothing to do with me, saying, how could I do anything so wicked and sin against God? Imagine that. So one night, after many fruitless attempts, I gave the servants the night off, and I made my move. But Joe was young and fast and fled, leaving me with his tunic in my hand. I'll show him, I thought. That night, when Potty came home from the office, I said, look at this. My husband has brought in a Hebrew slave just to make a fool out of me. He burst into my room, and I screamed, rape! He must have dropped this tunic as he ran out the door. Well, Potiphar was no cuckold. He sent Joe straight off to prison. So, who's got the power now, Joe? Huh? Wouldn't you rather be wrapped in my silky arms and in some rat-infested prison cell, Joe? Huh? What's the matter? Warden got your tongue?
Ooh, no woman wants to be rejected, especially when she's all decked out. So Potiphar's wife did the only thing a wicked woman could do to soothe her bruised ego. She threw the guy in jail. Now, sometimes heroes and heroines show up in the strangest of places. Take Pharaoh's daughter, for instance. We think of her as one of the real bad guys since she was, after all, an Egyptian, and we root for the Hebrews in this scenario. But she really does step up. Perhaps because, well, I don't know, her biological clock was ticking? Or maybe because Moses was just too darn cute. In any case, she not only rescues him from the river, but also rescues him from certain death. Not just from crocodiles or drowning in the Nile, but from the Pharaoh's edict that all baby boys must be killed.
I am the daughter of the great Pharaoh, Ramses. As Princess of Egypt, I can have just about anything I want. And I thought that I had everything I could ever want or need until one day when things changed in a very dramatic way. I was bathing in the Nile, and my maidservants were with me. Suddenly, I saw something moving in the bulrushes. It was a basket hung up on the reeds. Curiosity got the best of me, and I checked it out. Oh, it's heavy. There was a baby in it. Oh, a baby boy. A beautiful child, and I thought, how is it possible that... Oh, then I noticed the blue stripe, Hebrew stripe on the bedding, and it all began to make sense to me. The fact is, my father hated the Hebrews. He was afraid of their great numbers. That's why he made them into slaves. And that's why he ordered that every Hebrew baby boy under 2 years of age be thrown into the Nile. Something about population control. But how could he do that with innocent babies? Well, how could he be so heartless? What did these people ever do to him? Isn't it bad enough that they are forced to build his city? Some poor Hebrew woman must have sent this child down the river. Oh, but he's crying. What should I do? So I lifted him up and comforted him. I want him for my own, and I will have him. I will name him Moses, for I brought him out of the water. Oh, but he must be hungry. What should I do? Just then I saw a young Hebrew girl on the shore. She offered to take my beautiful Moses baby to some Hebrew woman to be nursed. Oh, made perfect sense to me. I will raise him in the palace as my own son. He will be given every advantage. He will be treated with royal education and have top security. Who knows? He may become a great leader, perhaps even the Pharaoh. All because I rescued him from the river by merest chance. But sadly, that is not how things worked out. Oh, he did become a great leader, all right. But when he learned that he was of Hebrew descent, he returned to his own people and led them out of Egypt, out of bondage forever. My father was furious, and he put every possible obstacle in his way. For his very kingdom was threatened by Moses, and he felt that Moses had betrayed us, especially after we had raised him all those years. I felt that way too, though Moses hugged me and loved me as a son. He tried to explain, and I tried to understand, and in time, I was glad to see them finally get their freedom. No one should be a slave. Not ever.
It's a bit of a stretch to think that Pharaoh's daughter was anti-slavery, seeing that slaves waited on her hand and foot. But she must have had some compassion for their dead-end situation, especially when it meant that she would never see her precious baby boy ever again. The Pharaoh's daughter has been a guiding light over the centuries for many nations struggling with the moral dilemma of slavery. But next, we meet the famous Delilah, an exciting woman who, for a bad girl, received an awful lot of print space in the Bible. Of course, she was a seductress, but she was also an excellent businesswoman, not to mention a double agent. Like the famous Mata Hari, she not only sold Samson down the river, but managed to trick the Philistines as well. And she laughed all the way to the bank. Delilah is the courtesan who brings Samson down, even as he brings the pagan forum down with his bare hands. Yes, well, he was gifted by God with superhuman strength, but he was also smitten by Delilah. He made a series of bad choices and finally met his doom because of her betrayal. She had the skills to get under any man's skin, and she used it to uncover his God-given strength. By his hair, or lack thereof, he meets his fate.
Let me tell you the story of Samson, the strongest man alive for a time, and how he came to me for love. I am Delilah, a Philistine businesswoman, and live in Sorek. As such, I should be an enemy of Samson and his family, but apparently not. He first came to the city looking for Philistine female flesh, the finest there is. He risked his very life coming into the city, for there were many there who were his enemies, for he had once slain 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. So I made it safe for him to visit me in my den of iniquity. He had seen me on the streets and was infatuated, to say the least. So when the Philistine lords approached me to seduce him and reduce him to a pulp, I gladly agreed, but at my price, 5,000 pieces of silver. And that was a lot of money in those days. We were great in the hay, so I saw him quite often. We had our intimacies and private moments, and so I asked him plainly where his great strength came from, but to no avail. He wasn't talking. Oh, and another time I put my hand in his and said, "Samson, you are so strong. You could crush my fingers with your hand. Suppose I was mad at you and wanted to hurt you. How could I do it?" And he said that if I tied him up with 7 undried switches, then I could have my way with him. Next visit, I was ready. And when I yelled, "Samson, the Philistines are attacking," he just flexed those superhuman muscles and those switches snapped like cotton cord. "Ooh, you naughty man. You are clever and you fooled me. Tell me true. What must I do to make you my prisoner?" And as weeks and months went by, we rolled around laughing and kissing and joking as lovers do. Then one night, he must have just gotten tired of it all. You see, for him, this was only a game. But for me, all that silver was at stake. He came into my arms and told me the truth at last. It seems he had been born a Nazarite, and for religious reasons he would never cut his hair. And that was the secret of his strength. And if he were to ever get a haircut or a shave, he would lose his superhuman powers and become like other men. I believed him. 3 times he sent me on a wild goose chase, but this time I looked deep into his eyes and saw him wanting me to believe him. So, the next day, I went to the Pharisees and Philistines and demanded my money. And surprisingly enough, they paid me in advance. So, on his next visit, I had Samson put his head in my lap, and as I soothed him to sleep, I signaled my secret barber, who shaved off his hair and beard. And when he awoke, I provoked him to let out his anger. "Samson, the Philistines are attacking." Only this time, they really were. And I laughed at his weakness and vulnerability. To fall in love with a harlot, and a Philistine harlot at that. But still, I decided not to tell the Philistine lords the secret of Samson's strength. And they didn't care. They had their prisoner, who was now blinded and forced to push the giant millstone forever. And they thought that because he was blinded, bound, and shackled, that he was finally in their power. So, at their next great event, they sent for Samson for their entertainment pleasure. The forum was filled with pagan people, for I am told, for I was not one of them. They taunted him and gloated over his helplessness. The crowd went wild. But Samson told the boy who had brought him into the forum to bring him to the place where 2 giant pillars supported the structure. Because, you see, while in captivity, Samson's hair had grown back. And if that wasn't enough, Samson prayed to his God. "Oh God, please remember me and strengthen me just this once and let me die as I deserve among these pagan Philistines. Well, there must have been some sort of earthquake. Or Samson's prayer was swiftly answered because the walls came tumbling down. Or so I was told by eyewitnesses. The two giant pillars bowed like reeds, and the night was filled with the sound of screaming and the dust of falling stone. So I was told. For I wasn't there myself. I was in my new house, with all my wealth and independence. Oh, I suppose I could have stopped it all. I suppose I could have told them the secret of Samson's strength. But then they would know what I know. And I want the power over all men forever. I just want the power.
Wow, she gives Norma Desmond of Sunset Boulevard a run for her money, doesn't she? But let's face it, we all want power and success, plus a nice guy who will love only us. It's rare when a woman gets it all. So we must choose carefully. Very, very carefully. Now, have you heard of the musical Wicked? Well, this witch is a good witch and a bad witch. She's better described as a psychic or even a medium. King Saul knew that sorcery was against God's law, and so he kicked all the sorcerers out of the country. Only later, heading into battle, did he decide that a little fortune-telling couldn't hurt, especially since all of Israel was at stake. And so his men searched and searched until they found the one witch that did not follow his orders and leave town. It's hard to tell who's good and who's bad in this saga at any given moment. So grab a scorecard and please leave the lights on because this one is scary.
I am careful. I am vigilant. Since King Saul drove the witches and wizards out of Israel, I've decided to keep a low profile. That's why no one was more surprised than me when a knock came at the door late at night, and a man begged to enter. Not so fast! Have you not heard what King Saul has ordered, driving the witches and wizards out of Israel? Why do you put my life in danger? But the man begged and pleaded, and so I caved in, as usual. So, who do you want me to bring up for you? He tells me to bring up Samuel, and I am suddenly able to recognize the disguised king. Aha! You are Saul. Why have you deceived me? And Saul told me to have no fear and let him know what I saw. Ooh, I see an old man, a god, coming out of the earth. He speaks. So why have you bothered me to bring me up from my place of rest? And Saul said, the Philistines have us surrounded. We're soon to engage in battle. Where is the God of Israel? And Samuel said, why do you come to me, seeing that God has become your enemy? Tomorrow after battle, you and your sons shall join me here under the earth. At that, King Saul fell senseless to the ground. Well, I became worried about him. I mean, especially after hearing his fate. Please, Your Royal Highness, please wake up and eat. For you have beheld a gripping spectacle which has knocked you senseless. Please, here, take this bread, and I have a fattened calf which I will prepare for you and your men. And so they ate their last supper And to tell the truth, I was relieved that he could no longer punish me for breaking his own law, driving the witches and wizards out of Israel. But I was also saddened to see such a great and mighty king as Saul and his sons get flattened in battle. And as for me, well, Rudyard Kipling later told it best. Oh, the road to Endor is the oldest road and the craziest road of all. Straight it runs to the witch's abode, as it did in the days of King Saul, and nothing has changed but the sorrows in store. For those who go down on the road to Endor, for those who go down on the road to Endor, for those who go down on the road to Endor.
Wow, my goodness, we even got a little musical performance there ourselves, didn't we? You know, she did have a shred of goodness about her. She let him in, she fed him, and she told him his future about that bitter battle forecast. Still, you know, I don't think I would cross her if I were you. She seems totally bipolar. I mean, like seriously, perhaps in need of therapy. But next we have a story with a little bit of everything. Mystery, voyeurs, seduction, adultery, betrayal, and murder. You know, as great as King David was, Bathsheba was definitely his downfall. Not by her design, for she seemed happy being married to a deployed military man, but by following King David's orders, she became smitten with him. So smitten, in fact, that she became pregnant. Making the wrong choice caused multiple crises to crash in on her. Could she have learned to make better choices? Would becoming the queen bring her more happiness? Well, let's find out as we meet Bathsheba.
I am called Bathsheba, which is appropriate because I adore taking baths, especially on my rooftop in the moonlight. Since my husband Uriah has been off to the war, it's become one of my most comforting rituals. So one day, while I was bathing, a messenger from the king showed up. I don't know what startled me more, the fact that there was a king's messenger on my roof, or that King David had summoned me to the royal palace. But why? Especially in the middle of the night. It seems that the king had been observing me and my bathing rituals. Now, I know that King David was a renowned warrior from his youth, and he wrote beautiful songs and played the harp. Any woman would have been pleased to be beckoned by the king. But I was frightened, in fear for my life. I could not disobey an order from him. So, why did he want me when he had wives, servants, concubines, and anything that he could possibly want? And so we went. Ooh, he was so handsome. And he offered me wine and rich food, and finally seduced me. Well, I didn't want to be executed. Don't get me wrong. We had the most magical time together. But what about my righteous husband? I have betrayed him with my king. Not only that, I became pregnant with his child, and then Uriah returned from battle, and David tried to send him home for good behavior. He even tried to get him drunk so that Uriah would make love to me. That way Uriah would think that the child was his, when none of these manipulations worked. He sent him back to battle and had him placed in the front lines. When I later heard of his death, it broke my heart. Next thing I know, I'm being moved into the palace and giving birth to my first child. It didn't go well. My baby was very sick. And David was so overcome with grief and guilt that he fasted and lay flat on the ground for 7 days. But it didn't help. Our love child died, a punishment for our sin. A few years later, and a few sons later, I gave birth to Solomon, who would someday rule as king in David's place. But for the rest of my life, my heart ached for my murdered husband and my first child, who died because of our sin. Why must the innocent pay the price for the wicked? If only I had the chance to make a different choice, a better choice, I would do it in a heartbeat.
My gosh, that is a scandalous story. You know, we often second guess our decisions, and perhaps that's a good thing. You know, it's never too late to forgive, to ask forgiveness, to make things right, but it does take guts. You know, perhaps her theme song should be "Torn Between Two Lovers." But now we're going to take a look at another marriage, an adulterous marriage, exposed, complete with stoning. You know, what's wrong with this picture? Everything. A wife strays, gets caught, and is about to be stoned to death? But where's the other guy, her lover? If they were caught, how did he manage to slip away unpunished? Would stoning the woman satisfy the crowd's need for retribution according to God's law?
I can't believe we were so foolish. Foolish and in love. Everyone knows that love counts for nothing around here. Husbands are selected for you by your father. So, like many others, I ended up in a loveless marriage and went looking for love in all the wrong places and found it, or some version of it. I've never known true love. I never dreamed we'd be caught, but we were. And I was dragged into town as a warning to the other wives. I was so embarrassed that I was even sorry, but it was too late. A crowd gathered, some of them neighbors and friends, who spit at me. That was harsh, but what I truly feared was being hit over and over again with heavy rocks. The Jewish leaders pushed me to the ground and reminded the young Rabbi Jesus that the law of Moses required me to be stoned to death. But that itinerant preacher just stooped down and started writing something in the sand. Some say it was their sins. Then he stood up and said to them, "All right, hurl the stones at her until she dies. But only you who have never sinned may throw the first stone." Well, one by one, they went away and we were alone. My sin is ever before me, Lord. I hold my head in shame. Condemned and guilty, I come to you and call upon your name. Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me, Lord, and wash me white as snow. My sin is ever before me, Lord. Have mercy on my soul. Jesus helps me up, dusts me off, and asks if I'm okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. So, where are your accusers now? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, sir. Not a one. And I looked into his eyes and saw love for the very first time. Then neither do I condemn you. Go in peace. Oh, and sin no more. Thank you. Do not be afraid. He is with you. He will call you each by name. Come and follow him. He will set you free. He loves you, and you are his.
What a feeling to be saved. Literally, saved from death, saved from execution. It's the whole package this sinful woman receives. She is so grateful and relieved that she'll tell everyone she meets about her new best friend, Jesus. You know, none of our women are so far as despicable as Herodias. She truly was a sociopathic killer. No conscience, no guilt, never raised an eyebrow. Only one thing mattered: getting her way. Her insidious ways are legendary, and they're definitely the most interesting to revisit. Let's hear from her and her daughter, Salome, in this story of the premeditated murder of John the Baptist.
Some kind of nerve. Who does he think he is? Anyway, prophet? Ha! Who'd believe that hairy hermit? You see, it all started when I, Herodias, left my husband, Philip, for his brother, Herod, a much better catch as tetrarch of the region. Even our names matched, Herod and Herodias. It was meant to be. But that John the Baptist pest kept warning Herod and everyone else within earshot that our union was not allowed. Now, it's one thing to be constantly babbling about this or that Messiah, but this guy is getting way too up close and personal. And my husband, Herod, is such a wimp. He won't have John executed because John has such a strong fan base. So he threw him in jail. Fine with me, let him rot there forever as far as I'm concerned. But then one day, a better plan presented itself. Herod decided to throw himself this huge birthday bash. It was the red carpet event of the season. All the bigwigs were there. My daughter Salome came up with her own special birthday gift. She danced for them all and was quite the hit. Well, Herod was so pleased and proud that he promised to give her anything, up to half of his kingdom. So she runs over to my table and asks me what to ask for. Perfect. Now I have the plan and the perfect opportunity. I reasoned with her. Well, dear, is there anything you want or need? Is there anything that we have not provided for you? So then, Mama, what should I ask for? Perfect. Well, dear, you would give me much pleasure and do the neighborhood a great service if you would ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Then I watched as she made her way over to Herod and whispered my request in his ear. He turned pale. He paced and fiddled with his beard. But in the end, what choice did he have? He had sworn an oath in front of dignitaries and honored guests. So he gave the command and collapsed in his chair, looking a little bit peaked, if you ask me. Soon, the jailer entered with my arch enemy's head on a golden platter. Oops! Oh, it must have slipped. Ooh, Mom, that is so disgusting. Too true. But I finally had my sweet revenge. At last.
It is bone-chilling to think a woman could have absolutely no qualms about divorcing her husband for his own brother. No qualms about having John beheaded, which was seriously scary right there. And no qualms about using her daughter as a pawn to make all of this happen. She had no qualms, period. You know, her tagline should be, "Off with his head." But next, we'll visit a well-known and favorite character, the Samaritan woman at the well. You know, it's important to know that Samaritans and Jews hated one another. So for Jesus to speak to her, to even acknowledge her, is huge. Still, she is the first person, not just the first woman, to whom Jesus reveals himself as the Messiah. The Samaritan woman is a character we can all relate to. We may not have 5 husbands, but we find it fascinating that Jesus could pick this sinful person, this foreigner, this mere woman of all people, to share the secret of who he truly is, the Messiah. Oh boy, here she comes now.
I hate coming to this miserable well, especially in the noonday heat. It's the only time of day I can come when those other women aren't around. They give me such grief and I'll have no part of it. Ooh, there's a stranger at the well. A Jew. What does he want? May I have some water? Are you talking to me? Because I am a Samaritan, and in case you hadn't noticed, a woman. Why are you asking me for water? Aren't you a Jew? Oh, if only you knew the wonderful gift God has for you and who I am, you would ask me for some living water. Sir, you don't even have a rope or a bucket, and this well is very deep. How would you get this living water? You see, with well water, people soon become thirsty again, but the water that I give them becomes an eternal wellspring within them. Please, sir, give me some of your water so that I won't be thirsty again and I won't have to deal with this well every day. Tell you what, go and get your husband. But I'm not married. Too true, for you have had 5 husbands and the man you are living with now is not your husband. Oh, sir, I can see that you are a prophet or a psychic or something. But let me ask you this. Why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place to worship while our ancestors say that it was right here at Jacob's well? What's up with that? Look, the time is coming when we will no longer be concerned about whether to worship the Father here or in Jerusalem. For it's not where you worship that matters, but how you worship. Like, is your worship spiritual and real? You know what I mean? All I know is that the Messiah is coming, and when he does, he will tell us everything. I am the Messiah. Come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did. Is it possible that he is a prophet or a psychic or the Messiah himself? please, come now. And the people started coming. And they listened to him speak for 2 days. And then they believed for themselves. And as for me, well, I guess I'm just a born-again evangelist. Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling me today. I will go, Lord. If you lead me, you will tell me what I need to say. How would you like some living water? Well,
we could all use his living water as a thirst quencher for real life. The good news is that God grants us his grace every single day, if we are but willing to partake. She certainly did become the very first evangelist. Well, that sums it up for us tonight. Our lives are definitely the results of our choices, but we always have a chance to change our minds, to change our hearts, to change our lives. That's the good news. Jesus paid the price for our sins, even if you are wild or even a little bit weird. We hope you enjoyed these excerpts from Women of the Bible, the Good Girls and the Bad Girls, and also Women of the Gospel. Linda Gray Kelley, the playwright, producer, and performer, would be pleased and honored to bring her Bible dramas to your group or organization. The website can be found on your screen.